New friends, new opportunities, new partners. EG Tax.
We're really lucky to have a college planning specialist here. For those of you that have kids that are going to be going to college or grandkids that are in college, Jeff Boron is absolutely great. He's one of the financial guys from the Financial Guys, and we thank you, Jeff, that you, wherever you are,
I'm
that
behind
you came in and you shared our Saturday with us.
I love being here.
There you go.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Go have some pizza.
I don't want any pizza.
So, hi folks, I'm Jeff Boron. I'm with the Financial Guys, but I also have a separate entity called Send Your Kids to College, which is actually a 501c3 not-for-profit. And the reason we did that is a lot of the proceeds that I take in from doing planning or forums work for people, we put into a scholarship fund. So this year we just announced 4 winners, each going to receive a $1,000 scholarship, and it's for Western New York students only. So it's something we've been doing every year, we're pretty proud of. Today we're going to talk about 3 phases of college planning. I'm going to go through the first couple phases fairly quickly, which is what we call student positioning and test preparation. Focus most of our time on the aspect of paying for college, reducing the cost of college. That's the area that I handle. I have 2 other partners that are specialists in the other area. So we don't do a jack of all trades thing and I'm suddenly a guidance counselor. That's not what I do, but we have people that do that type of work. So PrepStart Consulting, we use PrepStart and we use Indigo. I think your flyers show Indigo, but they relatively work the same way. What PrepStart Consulting is doing is getting students ready for college. And why is this important? And I'm going to walk around and drive the cameraman nuts probably. Why is this important? Well, it's important because we know that certain things that we're doing today aren't working. And remember the old saying, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is insanity? Well, let's look at it this way. In a state school, the average student going in and coming out in 4 years with a degree is only 31% of the students who start school. So 69% of our students are not getting out in 4 years. And I always tell people, what's the most expensive year of college? Year 5 and year 6, right? Not only do you have tuition you didn't plan on and all the other expenses, but that student should have been out in the workforce as well, earning a paycheck. So you lost the income and you've got extra expenses. If you look at UBs right now, when they publish their award letters, they are publishing their 6-year graduation rate. And that's for a bachelor's degree, not a master's degree. Why is this happening? So many students are changing majors, changing colleges, changing direction, dropping classes. That all guarantees a 5 or 6 year degree. So what PrepStart does is it's a hands-on approach similar to, and I'm not saying we replace guidance counselors, I love our guidance counselors. Here's our problem. With the way the schools are staffed, a typical guidance counselor in our public schools has between 250 and 400 students. That's an impossible mission to give the kind of guidance to every one of them that they need. And by the way, they're spending a lot of their time on social issues like, parents splitting up, drug issues in the household. So this type of work, while they would love to do it, they can't do it for everybody. There's just not enough hours in the day. Danielle Del Monte is with PrepStart. I use Natalie Beeline from Indigo. They work the same system, if you will, and that's why they're kind of interchangeable based on the student. We start out with, for instance, a Myers-Briggs or an Indigo assessment. And what that is doing is it's really measuring not only the strengths of the student, but their motivators, the things that are important to that student and what type of work environment he or she will be successful in. I don't know if you saw Mike Hayflick, he's a friend of mine, we work together. And he is typical, and it went back all the way back when Mike was in high school. Mike was good in math, and so was I. Now, I happen to like accounting, but what happened is if you were good in math, you were either going to be an engineer or an accountant. And they didn't take anything into account, well, maybe I don't want to work in an office. Maybe I like to work outside. Or, yeah, maybe I'm good at math, but that's not what I want to do. So the motivators and some of the testing that gets done to understand what drives that student is going to get that student, first of all, into the right career, major, and then college. And that's so important. College is a three-way fit. It's about being academically fit, socially fit, and financially fit. Those three fits have to be there, or we're not likely to have a success. So the Prep Start approach is we look at some motivators, we look at some testing, we look at the Myers-Briggs, and from there we do one-on-one consulting with the student. We help them find internships, and it's so funny. I had somebody in my office the other day and they said, yeah, my older son went to school to be a teacher because it sounded great. Summers off and, you know, decent job, maybe a pension down the road. So he went all the way through to student teaching before I found out, I hate this. I don't want to do this. Now all of a sudden it's a career change. Now all of a sudden we're talking, we're going to go back for our 5th year to do something else. This is pretty much how we can't guarantee success, but we can highly increase the probability of success that a student will be able to find the right fit for a college, a major, and a career. The next phase that we want to go through real quickly, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, all-pro tutoring and test prep. So when I started doing college planning, I've been doing college planning since 2003 when I got my certification. And I've worked with a couple thousand families throughout Western New York, sending their kids to college. So I always like when I hear somebody say, well, my neighbor sent their kids to college, he's gonna help me. It's like, well, you know, maybe I might know something because I've sent a couple thousand kids to college, but we'll talk about kind of how people use their neighbors, their friends, and how much bad information is out there. Until several years ago, maybe about 5 years ago, I was strictly focusing on the financial aspects of paying for college, reducing the cost of college, using some different strategies to do so. I saw that there was a weakness, not only that I had students that were going through that changing major, changing career thing, but also they were getting great grades in high school. You know, they were, oh, my son or daughter has a 97 average, a 98 average. But they were doing poorly on their standardized tests, you know? So you had, and I'll name a couple schools. My daughter is both daughters are a product of Williamsville East High School. And we see that a lot at Williamsville East. We see the 98 averages with, you know, 1,000 SAT score. It doesn't jive. So I don't know if there's grade, is it one of two things. There's grade elevation, their grades are being pumped up so Williamsville looks better, or they're not prepared to take the test. Either way, I knew that these students really needed help with this. So I looked around at all the SAT, ACT preparation services, and I was shocked at the cost. They were thousands of dollars. And I found all-pro tutoring, and it's an interesting story. Denise and Jackie were former teachers for a number of years, and they got downsized unexpectedly. Their whole program got shut down at the school they were teaching at. So they spent a year looking at, they wanted to do SAT, ACT, and tutoring. They spent a year looking at what was out there and said, none of this is up to our standards, and they built their own. They started with one school district that they were working with. They're now in 19 school districts, and it's only been around since 2013. They're very passionate about what they do, and what's important to them is they want to make it affordable to everybody. And in spite of the meetings I've had with them saying, you guys got to raise your price, you know, because I don't know if people are going to take you seriously. They say, we want to make this affordable to everybody. We'll just go on our reputation. If we look at, they've been around since 2013, phenomenal services at an extremely affordable price. I'm going to just outline quickly what they do. They do some of these boot camps, which are great, and they're done at the high schools, community ed centers. They do Regents test prep, K through 12, if you've got a student that's struggling in an area, ACT, SAT, Regents, they'll cater a program to the needs of your son or daughter. The SAT, pretty much why do we do this? It's a standardized test. It's expected at most schools. Some schools are dropping test requirements. It's got 4 parts, and it takes about 3 hours to complete. I'm not going to go through the basics. I'll tell you what I have learned about the SAT and the ACT. Same reasons for the ACT. The big difference between the SAT and the ACT is the fact that the ACT is much more time sensitive. You are under the gun. If you look at English, 75 questions in 45 minutes. If you look at mathematics, a minute a question. You're going pretty quickly. The other thing is the ACT has a science component, which the SAT does not. So what we have found is those students which are more geared to science, technology type careers, and they're good at those subjects, will probably like the ACT better. If they're a slow test taker, no matter what, they're probably going to like the SAT better. I won't go through the essay. There's an optional essay. We recommend doing it. Why is it important? Well, what I've seen through the years is certain scores, and I'll use the SAT, a 1250 SAT or above pretty much will win a lot of merit money at many of the colleges that we apply to as Western New Yorkers. That seems to be a magic number, 1250. And if your son or daughter gets an 1180, a 1200, with just a little bit of help, we can probably push them over, and that just is thousands and thousands of dollars of difference. Here's what our average scores are. So if we go to Canisius, there's our average SAT, Buff State, and then you look at these higher profile schools like Cornell, and when I counsel parents, I have students that are way underneath the average incoming freshman at a school like Cornell, and they're just want to push that student to Cornell. The guidance counselor wants to push the student to Cornell or Boston University or Ithaca, and I never see it being a good fit because that student is going to work as hard as they possibly can in college to hopefully get a B. You're surrounded by the best minds from not Western New York, from around the country. And think about that. That's how frustrated I would be if I was running with a bunch of marathon runners, right? And it's like, I might want to do it, and I might feel good, but I'm certainly not going to keep up with what they do. Okay, I'll just skip through. So the preparation timeline, during the junior year, we take the pre-tests, and they give us a good indication, and there's some scholarship opportunities from the PSAT. During the spring semester, we're going to take the SAT and the ACT, and your senior year, what All Pro recommends is we like to try to get them out of the way before the senior year if possible, if not at the beginning of the fall. But try to get it done, because right now in the fall, those seniors are applying, doing their Common App, working on their college essays. They also offer a free once-a-month simulated test. Now, here's what they do. They bring you in, no charge. They work at Maryvale High School and Niagara University. Your student sits down, takes the test for free. They develop a detailed scoring report to say, here are the areas that your son or daughter might need some help with to boost their score. The thing about what they're doing is they're not replacing all the knowledge that your son or daughter has received throughout all his middle school and high school years. They're focusing on the areas that we can get some bang for our buck to move that 1150 to 1250. What areas, if we concentrate on, have the biggest amount of questions and points that we can go up? And it's a very focused process. Denise and Jackie, they're in the brochure you have. Now my fun part. I'm going to talk about tackling the runaway cost of college. And this is what I do. So this This is where I tend to really enjoy speaking about. So what's really interesting is if we look at college and we look at inflation, it hasn't been fair to us parents sending kids to college. For instance, today, look what we could send, if we had the same inflation as we've had throughout our history, look what we could send a kid to Harvard for. And obviously we know it's a lot more than that. Here's the graph, and we always see these healthcare costs just rising and everybody complaining about healthcare, but look at college inflation relative to anything else, including healthcare. It's been runaway. And a lot of that, there's some different speculation of why, but a lot of it was for the last 10 years, 20 years, the ease of borrowing and the lack of understanding that students have of the cost of borrowing significant amounts for education. You know, we're expecting our 18-year-old and 19-year-olds to commit to lifetime decisions about debt. And debt sometimes as much as a mortgage that we might have on our homes. And they don't understand it. But yet they get plowed into it. They get emotional about college. And I work with it all the time, and I have the students, and I'm the third person in the room, the student saying, I don't care about how much debt, that's where I want to go. And the parents have thrown up their hands saying, hey, I don't know, and we have parents that say, well, whatever he wants, he'll just take out loans. That's not fair, because I then have the after effect coming to my office after their 4 or 5 years is done, and they're out making $40,000 a year, and they've got a $2,000 a month student loan payment, and it can't work. So my job is to try to stop some of that. So how much is college today? If we look back, your average state school in state is an affordable option. A state school out of state, there's got to be a compelling reason for me to do that. It's like if you live in Pennsylvania, don't go to UB. If you live in Buffalo, don't go to a state school in Pennsylvania unless there's a compelling reason. They have something to offer that you can't get in New York State. Private schools now go anywhere from $40,000 all the way up to, there's a $75,000 school this year. In fact, there's many $75,000 a year schools. We look at some of these schools like Cornell, $74,000, Boston College, they're all $70,000-ish a year. As I said before, the biggest problem we have is that 4th and 5th year. And that's what we try to avoid by doing our student positioning with Prep Start and Indigo. So our problem is we all see our kids like this. We remember our kids when they were playing, it was fun. They're more like this today. And time just flew by. And I can honestly say that probably 1 in 50 families I work with actually started a plan and put away enough money that will pay for college. I mean, very, very few do that. So the big thing is having a plan, having an understanding. Because we always focus on the first child going to college. We got to focus, if you have more than one, focus on sending all of those students to college and doing it right. How are we going to pay for this? Well, there's merit-based aid. If your son or daughter is very, very good academically or perhaps athletically, there are merit scholarships. There's need-based financial aid. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We can pay for some of this out of our income. So I make X and I'm going to take the first $10,000 a year and use that for college. We might have savings and assets. And then there's loans. We really don't have any other place to get the money from. The main thing when it comes to all of these is to get an understanding, really understand the process, and be prepared. And while I like to work with students, families when students are sophomores, then juniors, unfortunately I get the calls right now, my phone is ringing off the hook with, it's time to do the FAFSA, my son or daughter is going to school, and they have no idea how it's all going to work. And it's a shame, because what I see happen every single year I've been doing this, is we're all emotionally caught up in a school that is not going to be a fit financially for that family. Then it's a big letdown. You know, so I use the analogy, it's like your 16-year-old gets their learning permit, right? We take them out driving, and now it's time, you know, thank God, we're not going to have to drive them to their games, we're not going to have to drive them to their girlfriend's house, we're not going to do any of that anymore, we're going to get them a car. And what do, Mom and Dad? You take them down to Town BMW and you have them drive a brand new 7 Series BMW with a sticker price of $120,000. Would you do that? Parents do it with schools. You know, they drive down Ithaca College. It is a beautiful school, right? It's gorgeous. I'd want to live there. But if it doesn't work out in the financial system, don't get your heart set on it. Don't get your kids' heart set on it. Because then it's this big emotional tug-of-war where the kid has gone, he's told all his friends. Mom and Dad might have told some of their friends on the sidelines of the football game or the softball game. You know, they might have even bought the sticker for the back of the SUV. But then we find out it's not going to work. So do your homework up front to understand how everything's going to work out. And we use a system that does it by school. And I'll show you how the system works in a second. The financial aid process, every school has a cost of attendance. We're going to come up with something called your expected family contribution. That is done in 2 ways, the FAFSA form and the CSS profile form. Some schools, about 400 now, require the CSS profile, much more in depth. And the difference between those two is your financial need. And I'll show you in a minute, it doesn't mean that that's what you're going to get for financial aid, but that's your need. It basically gives that financial aid director an idea of where you stand and how much award money you're eligible for, and then they decide how much award money you receive. Expected family contribution, that's the amount of money that you're gonna, I call that your college tax. The amount of money you're expected to pay each year for that student to go to school. And it's calculated in a couple ways. Main components, there are many components to it, but the main drivers are going to be the parents and the students' income and assets on the FAFSA and how those are positioned. Now, student income, usually we don't have a big problem with that because they're not out making huge amounts of money. Student assets, sometimes there's some opportunities there to work with. Parent income, parent assets, and how those incomes and assets are positioned. I'm going to just skip ahead to talk about the timeline. So we're using, about 2 years ago, the system stepped back a year. What we used to do is file in January and use the estimate for the tax year prior. Now we're using what's called prior. So if your son or daughter is going to college in 2019, which is the people I'm working with right now on, kind of last stage, we're using the 2017 tax return. This then should tell you that we need to plan early, because if you're coming to me in your senior year, we're looking back you can't change 2017. If there was some opportunity to do something, it is too late. Yes?
What if your income doubled in 2018?
Well, no, but when your son or daughter goes to the following year, that's where it's going to be done. This has to be done every single year. But the best thing is that's actually a good solution for you because of the fact that a lot of schools do what they call their baseline years. They don't recalculate everybody's financial aid for all 4 years. They'll spot check. It's kind of like going through customs. So everybody coming in for their freshman year, it's called their baseline year, they're going to go through this process at the financial aid office. However, returning students sometimes, they don't have the time or the resources to go through and look at everybody. So you might get lucky. Okay. So there's no cost for you to complete the FAFSA to do it. And I hear some of these quacks, so I do a couple hundred of them a year. And for people that either don't have the time or they're worried that they're not going to do something right, it's about the same as doing your tax return. But I hear so much of this quackery out there. Don't pay somebody to do your FAFSA. It says free is the first word. Could you imagine we wouldn't be sitting here today if it said free income tax return, right? There's no cost for you to file your income tax return. The IRS will take your money, but we have services like EG Tax that know how to do it and either save you time or make sure you do it correctly. Same with the FAFSA. We do these for $79. We do the FAFSA, TAP, and Excelsior for $79. So it's not a big profit situation, but it gets me some money to throw into the scholarship fund. That's really why I do it. The CSS profile, much more involved. So the difference between the CSS profile is this deeper dive into your financials. It's going to possibly look at a couple years of tax. If you have a business, it's going to want to know a lot of information of the business. If you have a divorced or separated family, it's going to want information about the non-custodial parent. It's going to want to know all about your retirement assets, your pension, the value of your home, when you bought it, how much you paid for it, how much is your mortgage payment, and possibly what cars do you own and drive. Very, very intensive. And so why did this CSS profile come around? Why are some of these schools using this? And the reason being is with the FAFSA, there are certain things that wouldn't feel right, but would have a family qualify for financial aid, needs-based financial aid. So let me give you an example. We've got the Smith family. I always use the Smith family. They live in a $5 million house, fully paid for. They have 10 Ferraris and 10 Maseratis, all different. They buy a new one every year, okay? Dad has $22 million in his IRA. What do you think? Do they need financial aid, guys? No. But using the FAFSA system, they could qualify for a Pell Grant if it was positioned right. Not with a CSS profile. So why did this come around? The CSS profile is used by schools which rely a lot on endowment money to give awards to students. Money that former students of that school are now contributing back as an alumni. And they protect that endowment money like it's their last dollar. And those endowments are big. If you look at Harvard, they have 28 full-time financial money managers like me working on that endowment. 28 of us. That's how big it is. Harvard could send every student to school for eternity without paying a dime, just by using the endowment and the money it makes. It'll never happen, though, because they treat it like they don't have anything left. So in order not to turn off some of that endowment, because if you were giving money to school and you found out they were giving it away to the Smith family to buy another Ferrari, you probably wouldn't give money away anymore to them. That's why the profile came around. Okay, a lot of times I hear, we make too much money. Here's the other Smith family. Now they've got a nice income for Western New York. In fact, Western New York, we're fortunate because we can live pretty well without the income you need to live in California or New York City. They've got some money. The student has some money. They've got 3 kids. Take a look at their EFC. That's their expected family contribution. This family will qualify for needs-based aid at almost every private college across the country. So I have families say, oh, my husband made $100,000 last year. We're not going to qualify. Yes, you will. Think about those schools if they're applying that are $70,000. They're going to qualify for $35,000 in financial aid. Yes?
Are the parents' assets including retirement assets as well?
On the profile, yes. On the FAFSA, no. Pardon me? On the FAFSA, no. Nope. Okay, so there's some strategies. Sometimes it might make sense to reposition the way assets are held. There's some tax advantage planning, which I could concur with Chris, Esther, and Tiffany. There's some things you can do tax-wise to make sure that you're getting tax credits and things which are available to you. Understanding sticker price and net price, we're going to go through that in 1 minute. Community college, Sage tuition reward points as well, which we'll talk about. So asset repositioning, you've got to, I hear these quacks saying, take all the money out of your kid's name. Maybe yes, maybe no. If you're a very high income based family, then no. Why would you do that? You're shifting assets to a potentially higher tax bracket. Know before you do anything where you stand, the schools you're applying to, before you just start carte blanche doing things. I work with families that are needs-based, and I work with families that will never be needs-based. They have adjusted gross incomes on their tax return of $500,000. Well, we're not going to be shifting assets to the student, or away from the student. We might be shifting assets to the student. Okay. I want to get to, when we talk about sticker price and net price, I use some software that's really got all the award histories embedded in, all the statistics about the college. So when we're looking at college, I actually input all of your data, all of your tax data, all your family data, and we look to see how each school is going to work for us. We look at cash flow and we look at financing. So I want to get to this exercise to understand how college net price really works. Okay, remember, we got the Smith family. Now, if Brittany Smith was your daughter, and she came home one day after talking to the guidance counselor and said, hey, Mom and Dad, the counselor said I should apply to these 4 schools. What are you going to tell her? These are 4 real schools. Which one do you want her to go to? College A? Community college. Well, we've got colleges ranging in price all the way from $30,000 to $70,000. And this slide is actually 2 years old, so it's gone up from there. So the answer is we don't know yet. Now let's take a look at how this really works. This family has an EFC of $24,000, fairly typical what I see in Western New York. Here's how those costs are made up. So when they come up with total cost of attendance, it pretty much includes everything. Your books, their fees, and even some incidental type expenses, because if you think those don't occur, you've never sent a kid to college. So that's how the prices come up. There's their EFC. So remember that formula down here. This is how their need is calculated. So here's their price, but they're eligible. They have a need. This is what the financial aid director would see. Anywhere from $7,000, all the way up to almost $50,000. Now, every school will meet need differently. So what I mean by that is you take a look at school A, they're meeting 45% of that need. They're going to help you with 45% of that dollar amount. Where school C is going to help you with 100%. And there are a lot of schools out there that are 100% as far as meeting need. They're going to meet the need in one of 2 ways. One is gift and grant money, which is free. We don't pay it back. It's a grant, it's a scholarship, whatever you call it, it's free, and you don't have to pay it back. Or they're going to meet it with something called self-help aid, which is loans.
I caught something you said before, that parents may want to start shifting assets to the children.
Possibly, to avoid the kiddie tax. You got to avoid
the kiddie tax now is a lot higher, it's trust rates,
right.
So you got to really weigh the difference.
Right, well, I'm looking, when I do that, it's usually parents with AGIs over $500,000.
Okay.
They're in a pretty high tax rate.
Just saying.
Yep.
Kiddie tax is not nice.
No, unfortunately, they changed that on us a few years ago. Self-help aid, loans, and a work-study job. So, you can borrow money subsidized, and you can get a job. So the unmet need, they're meeting 45%, they're going to leave you with $3,842 plus your EFC in this case. But what we really want to see is how this all works out. Here's our net price for these schools. After all the math flows down and after we put it through, what college now would you like to have her go to? Duke. And so these are real schools. This is how it works. But I'll have parents that will tell their son or daughter, don't even apply to those schools. And it's wrong. I have many families in Western New York that can send their son or daughter to a private school, say Canisius, Niagara, St. Bonaventure, for the same price as going to a SUNY. It all depends on how the situation lays out. But you've got to know that going in, even before you start doing college visits. I mean, why are we visiting things that don't make sense? We're wasting time, we're wasting money, and we might get attached to a school that is not going to be effective for us. Sage tuition points when you come in. It's a free program that I am involved with. Some University of Wharton professors started it, and what it really is like a frequent flyer miles. So when I consult with people, they come in for a consultation, they get 500 Sage tuition reports points, which is like $1. A point is like a frequent flyer mile. So they come in, the cutoff, their son or daughter cannot be past June 30th of the junior year. So they can't come in as a senior, they won't get any points. And it's a program that was started to help the private colleges attract students that may or may not look at them because their sticker price is too high. And I'm going to give you an example. There's different ways to earn Sage points, but I have one family now, and it was between Canisius and Niagara. Canisius participates in Sage. Niagara does not. St. Bonaventure does. They have 14,000 Sage points accumulated. So they're going to get 14 grand off of Canisius. If their awards come out pretty similar, where do you think they're going to go? The other thing too is, just for full disclosure, no one's writing you a check. But what this is doing is the colleges that participate want to get your email address or your mailing address so they can send you some of those nice brochures that your mailbox gets flooded when your son or daughter's a junior. And but as an aside, I always love, I can't tell you the amount of times I hear parents say, well, we're looking at this college. They really want him or her. And when it comes down to it, it's because they got a flyer. Colleges have marketing departments. They're a business. You're a customer. And we always have to remember that. And we've got to get a good value buying something. Okay. Come on. There we go. Let's talk about loans. Now, when I have parents and students come in, I say, how are you going to pay for college at our first meeting? And they will always say, loans and scholarships, every time. Before they understand loans, first of all, and because we all think that our kids can sign on the dotted line, they're going to get a loan, because it's for college. And before the parents realize that the only one that thinks their son or daughter is actually going to apply for the scholarships is the parent, because our scholarship goes to all the guidance offices. I send out a mailer. I mean, it gets flooded, and we'll get less than 100 responses a year. And that's a local scholarship just for Western New York. So it's not like one of these Campbell's Soup one that anybody can apply to. You can only apply to it if you go to Western New York schools. What the guidance counselors tell me is the only people that pull the scholarships out of the rack in the guidance office are the parents. So, and I always have students that know all of a sudden, I'm going to school in the fall, I'm not going to have enough money, what scholarships are available? This is something they should be working on when they're sophomores and juniors, not last minute, but we all know our kids procrastinate. Mine does, right? So when they say loans, the only loan that your son or daughter can take out in his or her name only is the Stafford loan. That amounts to $27,000 over 4 years. It's a pretty good interest rate. Right now it's 5.05% payable over 10 years, but $27,000 over 4 years isn't a lot of money. Once we go beyond Stafford loans, we get into your involvement. The Parent Plus loan is kind of the sister of the Stafford loan. That is a parent loan. And I would rarely recommend parents to do this. This is a loan in your name. The interest is not great. And your son or daughter actually has no responsibility to pay it back. It's your responsibility. And it's not a great interest rate. Private loans, when I show you the interest rates that are happening out there, these don't look attractive, but private loans is usually the resource we go to after Stafford loans. And the interest rates I saw last year, in August timeframe, or last August, were about 8.5%. Parents will have to co-sign a private loan. Somebody the other day was telling me, my neighbor said that their son got a loan to pay for the rest of his college and they didn't have to co-sign. I said, please call me and tell me what bank is doing that, because I know of none. Think about it this way. Banks are there to make money. We have $1.5 trillion of student loan debt out right now. It has a 15% default rate. Why? Because students are coming out with huge amounts of debt, and even if they wanted to pay it back, they can't. So it's not collateralized. We don't pay our mortgage payment. We don't live in the house anymore, right? We don't pay our car payment. Guess what? We go out in the parking lot and our car's not there anymore because a truck came and towed it away. They can't do anything to a student that didn't pay his student loan back. There's no collateral. So that's why they're 8.5% loans. Home equity is another source, but you can talk to Chris and Tiffany and Esther. The rules changed on that a little bit, not quite as friendly. Right, only unless you improve your home.
Only for that, but
Only.
you can't use it if you use the home equity line of credit for student loans or anything, you can't use the interest of the right.
That's right, I forgot we got a ringer in the room. Good job. So, what not to do? I'm most proud sometimes of what I stop people from doing. Putting the tuition on their credit card and worry about it later, because later comes the following month in the mail and it's not nice. 401k liquidations or large loans, usually not a good idea, but part of my plan is I look at where you are in the retirement spectrum as well as college. What do we do typically? All right, we're going pretty fast. Life moves pretty fast. Worry about what's the next crisis we got to solve. Let's knock that down. And we take it sequentially. Well, do some math in your head, everybody. When your last son or daughter graduates from college, think about what year, how old you will be at that time. How many more years before you retire? And it's not going to be a lot of years. So you can't be blind to your long-term plan just to fix a short-term problem. All right, let's talk about what I see after the fact. And I wish people would come to me ahead of time, because I get more of these calls than the people that want help to not get in this situation. And unfortunately, there's not a lot I can do for many of them. Brittany Smith, she finances $80,000 of college. It's not a lot of money today, actually. She takes the Max Stafford loan. Then she borrows with private loans. Mom and dad are nice enough to co-sign. When she graduates, that's her student loan payment a month. Over the term, that's how much it will cost her. That's only 80 grand. And I'm telling you, I had, I could tell you stories all day long, but I had a father bring in his daughter, and she had about $130,000 worth of various student loans. She was working she went to school, got her degree, She came out and she's very proud of her job. She works for a not-for-profit that does good things, and she's director of something or something. And she's in trouble because she doesn't know what she can do with her student loans. They're looking at just refinancing them, stretch. But the problem is, I asked her salary, and she goes, well, I make $15 an hour. That's 30 grand a year. So a rule of thumb that I use is don't borrow more than a year's worth of salary in the job you're going to go for. That's just a good rule of thumb. You won't get in much trouble if you do that. Now I have another young lady I'm working with right now, Consolidate, refinancing her loans. She's a pharmacist, but she's got $100,000 worth of debt, but she's making $125,000. It's a different story. If you're going to school, know what your career and what your salary will be before you get into this kind of debt to make sure it can sustain. So look at your objectives, and this is the important one. How many people believe educating our child should affect our lifestyle and our retirement, affect our chances of retiring? I always say you can borrow for college if you do it smartly, but you can't borrow for retirement. You can't go to the bank when you're done working at 65 years old and say, I don't want to work anymore and I can't pay my bills, I need a loan. They're not going to give you one. So, who can help with all of this? It gets complex. A certified public accountant or somebody at EG Tax, well, they could probably help you with forms, but I know Chris and Tiffany usually send people to me. The guidance counselor, they're way overworked, and they're not going to give you financial advice. The college financial aid officer, this is my favorite. I've had parents say, well, the guy at the college said he's going to help us do this. Could you imagine going to the car dealer and saying, the salesman's going to help me get the best price? Right? It's craziness. A financial advisor, a traditional financial advisor, they don't understand college planning. They're not certified. They're going to tell you, let's open up a 529 plan. Let me sell you a 529 plan. That's not college planning. Where most of the people get their information is right here. And there's going to be a free t-shirt that I'll get you at the office if anyone can tell me who these two people are.
It's in the slide.
Oh, you cheat. Okay. Well, for being honest, I'll get you a shirt. I'll get you a financial guy's shirt. All right? You just have to give me your name and number after and the size, and I'll get you one. Next door neighbor and water cooler buddy. That's the myths that I hear. Right now, I'm getting these calls, right? We're in October. I heard if we don't apply the FAFSA by October 1st, it's first come, first served. It's all going to be gone. It's like, has your son or daughter completed their Common App yet? No. Well, they don't even know who your kid is yet. You know, let's not get crazy. But all this craziness that's out there, so many myths, it's crazy. How I do things, I have people come in, I'll give them an estimate of their EFC, show them a couple schools, teach them how the system's going to work. If I can help them, I'm going to tell them, I think I could help you. If not, I'm going to give you some good tips and advice and say, call me anytime. And if you want me to do your forms, $79 for the scholarship fund. It's as easy as that. Thanks for attending. I think I'm going to be around in this room to answer any one-on-one questions you might have. But if there's any general questions that would help the rest of the audience, yes, sir.
Yeah, so general question, we have a daughter and we're trying to figure the best way to save for her education.
Okay.
And, kind of lean towards 529, but also for, there's also Coverdale's account as well. Is there, so the one drawback to 529 is obviously the funds have to be used for education purposes, and if you don't use them for that, there's a penalty if you withdraw and use them for non-drawing.
Right, remember the penalty is only on the gain, right? So it's not on the whole amount. So if you end up putting 10,000 in, it's not like you're going to pay a 10% penalty on the full 10,000. If the 10,000 grows to 11, you'll pay a 10% penalty on that extra 1,000 on the gain. Yes, and you could transfer that to another student if the beneficiary, if you have more than one child, or you want to be very benevolent to a niece or nephew or something like that. But yeah, 529s are a nice thing because they're a conscious effort for parents and grandparents to save, but they're not the be-all end-all, you know, for college. There's different ways you can save, but you know, 529 is kind of like the go-to. But you're right, there are some drawbacks to it. And also remember too, is the 529, when we're counting your EFC, that is an asset of the parents which is assessable. And I'll tell you what, our wonderful Department of Education combined with whoever passes these, there is something called the Asset Protection Allowance. So about 4 years ago, Mom, Dad, you could have about $42,000 worth of 529s or cash or investments, $42,000 before it affected one dime of financial aid, called your Asset Protection Allowance. About 3 years ago, we were looking at all our formulas when we were developing, when we were working on software, and said, it's not working. They dropped that down, and now it was about like 24,000. This year, what I heard when they developed the formula, it's even dropped down, now it's below 20,000. So it's not really fair. I mean, $20,000 between 529s, your checking savings, you know, cash in your shoebox, it's not a lot of money before it starts being affected. But it's only affected at a little over about 5.5%. So it's not the end of the world. It beats not saving at all. Let's put it that way.
Is there a savings vehicle you would prefer?
It depends on the situation. It is situational specific. So there's a couple different creative things that you can do, but it all depends on the situation.
Because we're trying to think as a family, like, should we save in 529 for the tax benefits? Should we save like maybe 60% of what we estimate a state tuition and fees would be? Kind of do it that way, not overfund it, but I just wasn't sure if you had anything.
Well, the first guideline I would know is how much you need to save for retirement, and make sure you do that first.
Sure, yeah.
And then 529 is what's left that fits in the budget from a savings plan. So we love our kids, but there's going to come a day where, you know, unless they're going to support us, we need to have retirement plans.
Correct. Correct. Except for your
Yes.
With all the availability of going to school and getting a degree online, what are you seeing or predicting in regards to these colleges that are costing so much money? Is there going to be a change?
You know, I think it'll be subtle, and I think you'll have students that might do a portion of their curriculum online. I have a daughter in college right now, and she's doing quite a few classes online. I mean, I like, she watches the lecture on her laptop, you know, and said, what's the difference if I'm sitting in a seat like you are today or watching it on this TV? It's the same lecture. But I don't think it'll ever, the problem with online is, I believe the student has to be much more motivated, because there's a lot better things to do than stare at your laptop. Where if you have to go to class, you know, that's a little different. Well, they can skip class too, but it's scheduled, where online is, you're going to do that when you have time.
But are the classes then less expensive? Is college less expensive?
No. No.
Still costs the same?
No, and that's, you know, initially when I started seeing some of these Phoenix universities and things, I thought, wow, this is going to be a really cost-effective way. It's not less expensive. Yeah. Yeah.
You're taking a class in 5 weeks, so you're doing so much more than having the, what is it, 5 months that you're in college for a semester? It's just, it costs me more to do my courses online. And so that classroom costs me more in 1 year, and I'm like, how long is that on my iPads?
Right.
Yeah, but you don't have the transportation, you don't
Yeah.
all of that?
No, you're right. It's more convenient, that's for sure. And you're saving some of those costs, but it's not less expensive per credit hour. Yes, sir.
Do you ever recommend kids to, let's not go to college right away, let's go work at Walmart or these places that are gonna send their kid that might have tuition reimbursement?
Yeah, but unfortunately, those are harder and harder to find for part-time people, you know, or students. But I got my master's degree that way, you know. So, I mean, I worked for corporate America, so they would pay for my master's degree. So it is a good way. And, you know, we don't like to say it, but, you know, the other way, and I've got one family doing it now, and I worked with them, but it's a program that they're doing with RIT, and that's programs like ROTC. And a couple weeks ago, I met 4 young guys, and the most polite guys you've ever seen. You know, they called me sir, you know, what is your name, mister? And I was like, where are these kids from? It turned out, remember when UB played Army in football a couple weeks ago? They were from West Point, they were in the band. But I mean, I wanted one of these guys to date my daughter. I mean, they were class guys. But so I asked them about how it all works. You know, you're getting an unbelievable education and you're becoming extremely marketable in the job market afterwards, but it's an 8-year commitment. You know, it's going to be active service plus reserves or all active. You're signing up for 8 years after school. But when you get out of that, you're either going to stay with the military and advance your career quickly, or you're going to get out and get a job very quickly out in the private sector. But I know you mentioned as well community college. And right now, for certain students, I'm a huge believer in that. For the student that has no idea what they want to do, it might be a good fit. Or the student that's not quite at that maturity level. They might be book smart, but they're not at that maturity level. Erie Community College, Niagara Community College has done a phenomenal job of doing a complete mapping with other colleges for what credits, what classes will transfer. Years ago, it used to be like, you know, a crapshoot, whether you're going to come out of there, and it was like, you know, oh, I hope Canisius takes these credits. You know, and I hope I don't have to take an extra year because they won't take half of my classes. Well, now it's mapped out. You know, if you go to ECC, you take this class, you get this grade, you don't have to take this class at Canisius. It maps right over. With that being said, my undergraduate degree is in accounting from Canisius, and I've got a good friend that graduated with me, but he went to ECC for 2 years. On his office wall is the exact same diploma that I have. And I'll tell you one thing, it costs a lot less money to do it that way. You know, when I think about the money, think about what it would cost now to go to Canisius and take a philosophy class, or a general religion class, or an English class. It's like, what's the difference if I went there or go to ECC for that? You know, so I'm a big believer in it. Unfortunately, I end up working with a lot of parents from Williamsville, Amherst, Orchard Park, and there's still this stigma that my son or daughter's going to ECC, they must be a failure. And they don't put the ECC sticker in the back of the SUV. So, but it's a great way to make education more cost effective with the same end result. Because let's face it, you know, when we all step back from this whole thing, it's about your son or daughter getting an education, a piece of paper, and a job. And it's all about return on that investment. So if your son or daughter is going to work or has a career goal of working as a social worker, well, let's not spend $200,000 to spend in a school. It's a great job. They do very good for people, but unfortunately they don't get paid well, right? So now let's not take a $30,000 a year job and spend $200,000 in education costs to do it. It's as simple as that. It's a little bit of logic, but unfortunately I don't always see it. Yes?
I was told that for a student who wants to go out of state, the credits are not transferable from New York State. Have you run into that?
It depends on where you're going out of state. And it really depends on the curriculum. A lot of transfers, they will not take the, so let's say you're a accounting major, they won't accept the accounting classes somewhere else. They want those core classes being done at their school. But I don't think it's carte blanche, a rule like that. Because you see a lot of students transferring between states. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up. And if anybody has any personal questions you want to ask, feel free. My number's on there if you want to come in for a complimentary consultation, see where you fit, get some ideas. I'd be happy to work with you and meet you then.
New friends, new opportunities, new partners. E.G. Tax.